Hello, everyone. My name is Rhiannon. I'm the new project manager at the ASEM Hub in welcome to today's Expert Group 3 webinar on the 5 capitals of learning, refocusing the lifelong learning agenda, including TVET. This will be given by Seamus O'Toole, who you'll probably know. He's the director of ACE here in Cork. He's a senior lecturer in politics, and he is the chair of the ASEM Hub. The respondent then would be Dr. Adeline Go from Brunei University. Her interests lie in exploring workplace learning, the development of professionals, and the changing nature of professional learning due to, but not limited to, digitization of work. So I'll hand over firstly to who will give his talk, and then Adeline will come in and respond, and we'll be happy for anyone to contribute as well after that. Okay, do you want to share your slides, Seamus?
Okay, so my basic idea here is that a lot of focus is put on human capital as sort of as a kind of a key driver of skills acquisition and in relation to the workplace and so on and so forth. And of course, human capital is really important. And I think the World Bank says that for many people, human capital is the only wealth they actually have. Which I think is worth us bearing that in mind. So it isn't an inconsequential thing. But the point I suppose I would like to make is that acquiring human capital in itself, you know, it can be taken in isolation. And human beings have a holistic reality, and there are very different aspects of their lives that require learning and in the building learning, and everybody doesn't start from the same place. So these are important, and they're the points I really want to, I suppose, bring home this morning. Now, these are the 5 capitals I'm going to talk about, but right at the middle here, we can see the word reflexive modernity. And to me, that's a critically important dimension to what I'm going to talk about, because reflexive modernity is really about the sense that all of us, each one of us that's here today at this webinar, and all of the other people around us, increasingly create a portfolio of identity in terms of who we are, what values we ascribe to, what are important to us, etc. We're also, very often we talk about placing the learner at the center. If we place the learner at the center, then we have to acknowledge who the learner is, what their motivations are, what their broader needs are. So I just want us to keep that in mind the whole time in terms of this journey. In relation to seed capital, basically what I'm referring to here is the sort of the basic starting point for somebody. Identity capital is around who they are. Cultural capital is around the context in which they're operating. Social capital is around the linkages they have. And then human capital, I think you're probably more aware of, is around their capacity to work and the skills they have and so on. Okay. So, as I said, with seed capital, we're talking about the baseline of which the learner is starting. So not everybody has the same seed capital, and we can see that certain individuals are already privileged from the beginning because of the accident of birth, where they're born, the families they're born into, the experience that their parents have in terms of education and learning, and a whole lot of other kinds of things. But seed capital is also about the capacity to turn whatever you have into something more. It's about investment. It's about investing in your future. It's about creating the first steps that can bring you along in your learning journey. And I think it's really important for us to remember this. Yesterday, I was very privileged to be at an event here in Cork City in the Simon community. And the Simon community is an organization, an NGO, that operates with people who are really in the most marginal place in our society. people who are dealing with addiction, people who are dealing with homelessness, and so on. And they really are, you know, trying to give people the opportunities to put their lives back together again. And they had an award ceremony giving out certificates for people who had achieved in their educational journeys. Now, seed capital is very relevant in that context. These people were being given the opportunity to create some seed capital, some learning that could take them on the next steps of their learning journey. So I think like it's really important for us to focus on this and bear this in mind, because unless we meet the learner where the learner is, then we're not really going to be able to achieve the kinds of things that are useful for learners, or indeed useful for broader society. And I just wanted to refer to a few things here that already give some people advantages in terms of what we would say is germinating the seed. So if somebody is in a context, a child is in a context where the parents are already in the education system, they're already well educated, they can give them a lot of direction, they can give them a lot of informational power and so on and so forth. And they also are strongly influential. And I just thought it was an interesting statistic here that if somebody's parent, sole parent, if they were in higher education, they have a 3 times higher chance of going to a higher education than somebody whose sole parent is just at has no post-school qualifications. So basically, the situation here is that very often those that have get more, and those that don't are left behind. And I think we need to be really, really conscious of that in terms of ensuring, I suppose, a more holistic and inclusive society. And in terms of letting no one behind, I mean, this is a very important mission for us in terms of what we do. But just to go through some of the factors that impact here. The parents' education, I've already mentioned that at some level. But again, this is really, really important in terms of creating seed capital. Language status, this can be hugely problematic where the person is not in a context which is in the dominant linguistic context of the society they're in. Educational attainment, obviously, depending on how successful you are in the education system, the better chance you have of progressing. Literacy practice at home and literacy proficiency at home is important. We see that the people who, I suppose, who are already educated are the ones the most likely to engage in further education and lifelong learning. And I just skip down to the second next one there for a moment and talk about partially met demand. I think it's really important that we focus a little bit on that, because partially met demand are those people who already have achieved something, and they are the ones who get along quicker. They're the ones who want more. They're the ones who engage more. That's exactly, you can see exactly there how the seed capital is working. These people already have the seed capital. They're in a position where they can, make more demands. They can make more advances and so on. And the ones directly above them there on the slide is the forgotten 90%. These are the ones, who are really struggling. These are the ones who are not participating. And these are the ones, I suppose, who seed capital, they're the ones who really need the seed capital. They're the ones who really need to get the catalysts going to make things happen for them. And in terms, Desjardins there says, and I think it's self-evident in some ways. So in relation to identity capital, again, this is critically important in terms of reflexive modernity, because it's around who we are as an individual. And if we're talking about placing the learner at the center of things, then we really need to be addressing the person in terms of who they actually are. So identity capital is around your self-esteem, your dignity as a member of society. But But we also know that identity capital is greatly enhanced through adult education and lifelong learning. Because through the education process, we begin to understand ourselves in a new and a different way. We know that, through education processes, people become somebody different and somebody new. So what we are involved in here in terms of lifelong learning, whether that's in TVET or in adult education or whatever sector we're in, the individual is in the process of change. And just to give you another interesting anecdote, one of the reasons why some excluded groups, especially ethnic minorities, are somewhat reluctant to engage in educational processes is they feel that their identity capital will be diluted. There will be a sense of who they are will be diluted in the education process, and we need to be very keenly aware of that. This also applies to groups like migrants and so on and so forth, in terms of who they are and what they are. So we need to be careful that in terms of when we're looking at identity capital, we're enhancing people's identity capital and not diluting it. I just wanted to give a sense of the world that we're in, because I think they're not that these are totally separate from each other, but it's important for us to bear in mind the complexity of the situation in which people are creating their identities and in which they are engaged in a reflexive activity. So we say on the left-hand side, we can see all these existential threats like climate. And I think in 2023, we have seen the extent of the threat from climate change, maybe more than we have seen in the past. There's threats around security. And again, we're seeing this in, here in Europe in relation to the war in Ukraine, but we see it around, hacking online and all of the various things that are happening. We saw it in health, particularly during the COVID pandemic, but, there's always a constant issue around health. Poverty, millions and millions of people excluded and left behind. Migration, more people are moving around the world in the current era than any time in human history. There's issues around food security, ecology, and a whole series of other things that we could go into in detail. So that's at one side. At the other side, we have a whole change in the dynamics around communications. We see this in terms of the media we deal with, how we send and receive messages, and so on and so forth. What we're doing this morning, I'm speaking in my home in a small rural house in Ireland, and people across the globe can engage with me. Globalization, there are lots of different kinds of globalization, but they are impacting in terms of how we understand the world and how we know the world. Waning conventions. This is around, a lot of traditions and a lot of norms were very rigid in the past, and they shaped who we are. Nowadays, these conventions are dissipating, and this gives us more challenges and more freedom in terms of our identities. So it's important that we're conscious of the context in which we're working. So just to give you, and I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to give you a sense of these, and I might just cherry pick a few of them. But I suppose the first thing is to say that identity is critical to our autonomy. It's our way of being part of human society. It's our way of being a human being in the full sense of the word. And I just wanted to, I suppose, to say in terms of reflexive modernity, the point here that Hannes makes, which I think really captures it, to place ourselves really at the center of our own life planning and practice. So in a sense, human beings are much more engaged in organizing and planning their own lives, and in terms of what they want to achieve, where they want to go, what they want to be, what they want people to understand them to be, what they want to work at, and so on and so forth. In the past, a lot of this was prescribed for you, and it's becoming less and less the case. And in that sense, we are involved in what Coda here talks about, intelligently strategizing and making decisions affecting our life courses. And this is what people are engaged in terms of engaging with lifelong learning and TVET is, they're strategizing, they're making decisions, they're trying to figure out what they can do next and how they can make a better life for themselves. But it's also around not just jobs and work and so on and so forth. It's also around how they see themselves impacting in that context. And again, I'm sorry for bringing back to an anecdote from yesterday, but one of the people speaking yesterday was a recent migrant from Latin America who came to Ireland and, fell into all kinds of difficulties, became homeless, involved in addiction and so on and so forth, and is now working. But one of the things that he said was quite interesting in terms of this idea of identity, because he said, I'm working on a building site. The building site I'm working on is a school. So I'm creating a future for children. I'm creating a future possibilities for education for children. So in terms of what he's doing, he's not involved just in bringing bricks around a building site. He sees himself, and he is in fact contributing to the creation of the education system. So it's important for us to bear that in mind, so people are not widgets, they're not just plugged in to do things, they also have a sense of why they're doing it and why it's important for them to do it in terms of who they understand themselves to be. Now we're talking about cultural capital. So I suppose I'm looking at some challenges here, and the first one here is to recognize and validate cultural capital regardless of where it has been earned. And I think this is a big, big challenge for us today in relation to the number of people who are moving around the world, people who are migrants, because, they come with cultural capital, and that cultural capital has value. People from ethnic minorities, marginal linguistic groups, religious minorities, and so on and so forth, they all have cultural capital. And that cultural capital has a value. So we need to, especially in the mainstream society in which they are operating, we need to be in a better place to recognize that cultural capital and not, to recognize that it has an importance. It has an importance for those people, and it is important for the rest of us in our society as well. Everybody has an opportunity to extend cultural capital in a reflexive way that allows them to identify their priorities, goals, and ambitions. And this is really, really important. And again, this can be quite difficult for people who are newcomers to society, but we must create opportunities for everybody in society to enhance their cultural capital. And I'm not just talking about, sort of high art or things like that, which are, of course, really, really important. I'm talking about all of the cultural artifacts and all of the cultural milieu in which they are operating. And I suppose the other thing to remind ourselves is that because we live in these increasingly diverse societies, they generate a whole richness and complexity that we all benefit from. And I think sometimes people lose that sense of it, especially, when you hear xenophobic talk and so on and so forth. There's not a recognition that, the fact that there's great diversity creates great opportunities for everybody to live more fulfilled and interesting lives. So why is cultural capital important? So it's important for people because it gives them a voice, a capacity to be active agents in shaping their own lives. So this is important. It's important that, in the US, they talk about Generation Zero, that people who have just arrived to the country. It's important that those people have an opportunity to shape their lives, to shape the lives of their families, and create futures in the society they're in. And in order to do that, they obviously are bringing their own cultural capital, but they need to be able to access the cultural capital of the society in which they're living. And it gives people the sense of belonging and being accepted, so this is important, that we mutually recognize cultural capital, because then it's no longer a kind of an exclusionary thing. We also, I suppose, have a challenge to not just tolerate, but to go beyond that and recognize and celebrate the cultural capital that is coming with people, regardless of where they're coming from. In terms of people who are newcomers to society, they need to be able to speak the language of the country that they're in. This is really important because it opens a lot of doors for them. But of course, it's also important for them, I suppose, to be able to maintain their own languages, and especially for children and so on and so forth, to be able to engage with grandparents and relatives back wherever people have come from. And I suppose the challenge for us is to make sure that the dominant culture accommodates this diversity. And I suppose in terms of our educational programs, in terms of our lifelong learning and TVET and all of these programs, we really need to be conscious of these, that it's not just one size fits all. We have to be conscious that, a lot of people are coming with a lot of diverse backgrounds, and we need to ensure that, we're giving them the wherewithal to continue and to move on with their lives. And I just wanted to quote this, the Centennial Commission on Adult Education, which was conducted in the UK a few years ago. And it celebrated a famous report on adult education, which was produced in 1919. So this was 100 years later, and they were reviewing and they were saying, basically, where are we now? And what are the kinds of things that we need to say and do to capture, I suppose, the dynamic that was there around the original commission in 1919. And I just want to pick out some points that they felt were critically important. Understanding of different cultures and backgrounds, so that, we're aware of different cultures and backgrounds. And I know we talk a lot about that, but we have seen a lot of challenges to that in the recent past. Respect the cultural context from which the learners are coming. And again, I suppose there's a tendency in some societies and in some movements to undervalue this cultural context. Also, and I think this is really important, this middle point here, that whatever we're doing is useful to the learner in their own culture as well as in their dominant culture. And it shouldn't just be about assimilation. It should be about giving people the wherewithal to thrive in the host culture, but also to in their own culture. Now, social capital, and again, this is very important, and this is all around the networks that we have. And I suppose the critical thing here is that some people, I suppose, have greater accumulations of social capital than others. And this doesn't just apply to newcomers into societies, it also applies to people who are from marginalized and disadvantaged communities. Because very often the social capital they have is an enclosed space, it's within their own communities. And in the education system and in the learning system, including in TVET, we give them new social capital, new links, new opportunities, new bridges out to other parts of society. And we all know that all of these things are critically important in terms of how we function in the everyday lives. How, which supermarket should we go to? Who do I get to fix my plumbing? What school should I send my kids to? These things are really, really important. They are critical things in terms of the way people can live their lives. Also in relation to how do I get a job? How do I get education or training that will help me to get a job? All of these things are very strongly dependent on good social capital. So in one sense, in order to engage better in learning and training and lifelong learning, people already need a certain element of social capital, but it's also important for us to recognize that we generate social capital that people can then themselves use. Very simple things like engaging with the people who are involved in the education or training at the top of the classroom, as it were. That's already extending your social capital. The other people in your group who may not belong to the same group or the same background as you is increasing your social capital. And I just want to just to refer to some of those ones, and I'll just stop maybe to start with the red one in the middle here, which is the strength of weak social ties. So this is around the idea that these weak social ties, these are not your direct relatives, these are not members of your family, these are people you know. And very often, especially in groups that are marginalized, that are maybe newcomers or whatever, they have strong ties within their own community, but they have very few connections outside of their communities, their networks. And if they can get additional weak social ties, they will be able to get job opportunities, they will be able to get educational opportunities, they will be able to get all kinds of opportunities for themselves, their families, those around them. So in terms of what we do, this is one of the critical things that we do. We build additional weak social ties. And that's critically important, especially in terms of marginalized groups, disadvantaged communities, and so on. And on the left-hand side there, Mikiewicz talks about these positive structural determinants and negative structural determinants. And that's really in terms of what we can do in this space in terms of creating positive structural determinants. So that's basically reshaping the paradigm for people from one of almost being doomed to failure. And again, if I refer to what was happening yesterday at the Simon community, it's exactly around that. People are sucked into these negative structural determinants, which is leading them to addiction and homelessness and, very, very poor outcomes. And then through their education process, they can change that paradigm and create positive structural determinants. So people can get jobs, they can do further education, they can get homes, they can have relationships, they can do all the kinds of things that, should be available to everybody. And then we talk about hop and skip relationships and hop and skip people. And this is an idea that Jacobs came up with back in the 1960s. And she was talking about, these kind of people who can make connections and links for you. And again, through education and training, we can create opportunities for people to engage with and link into these hop and skip relationships, which can bring them significantly on in their learning journey than incremental steps. And that can be critically important for people. And I suppose I don't need to go into this in too much detail to this audience because you already are aware of many of these, but it might be just no harm for us to remind ourselves a little bit around why these things are important. So we see, that shows that we, through lifelong learning, we've got a better health, better social networks, better well-being, and motivation to stay learning. And these are all very, very positive. Stepping stones into society, and that includes getting jobs, getting careers. And for older people, it's a cushioning effect, it keeps people, I suppose, connected into the broader society and the broader community as well. So they're just, just to mention some of these critical aspects of what we're doing and why they're important. And now I suppose this is the final one we're going to come to, human capital. And again, I suppose people are quite well aware of all of this. And human capital is the knowledge, skills, competencies, attributes embodied in individuals that facilitate the creation of personal, social, and economic well-being. So these are all the kinds of skills that we can generate that will give us better job opportunities, and very often the human capital becomes, I suppose, obsolete, and then we have to create new human capital because the workplace is changing constantly, or we worked in a maybe an obsolete area or whatever. And, I mentioned already the World Bank statement about being a sort of a wealth. And it's important, I suppose, we use the word capital, and I suppose we got into the place of thinking about human capital and so on and so forth as some kind of a label rather than it being a fundamental thing. But the idea of capital really is the idea of wealth. It's the idea of having something that you can invest, that you can use to create the better conditions for you and your life and for those around you. So I think it's important that we bear that in mind. And then with capital, I suppose, we also have to make sure that it's current. So the World Bank, as I said, mentioned earlier, has human capital is often the only asset the poor have. And they put it into the context of saying it depends on better education and health. Of course it does, but I would say human capital also depends on your capacity to have the other kinds of capital. If you don't have the seed capital, well then, the human capital you're going to get is limited. And if you don't have the identity capital and the cultural capital and the social capital, well then you're not alone is your accumulation of human capital greatly hindered, but also your capacity to invest your human capital, to exploit your human capital is greatly reduced. And I suppose the other thing just to bear in mind, and I just wanted to include this, is that sometimes skills from formal education become obsolete. Of course they do. Even, somebody who graduates with a degree program, they come out with, you think about somebody who graduated with a computer science degree in the year 2000. How useful are the skills that they garnered in 2000 in 2023? Now, of course, there are some things that are still useful, but so much has changed in the meantime. So we shouldn't just presume that there's a kind of a place that the person reaches and then it's finished and then it's all together. And that it's done and dusted. And the other thing is that informal education is really important because people accumulate a range of skills through varied life and work experiences. And this applies to all kinds of things and all kinds of aspects of what we're doing. If that includes using your smartphone, and these things feed into, I suppose, our capacity to operate within society. So we need to be careful that, I suppose, that formal skills aren't a done and dusted thing, and that also the non-formal and informal sectors are also generating really important human capital and other forms of capital. So learners have to be at the center, and I mentioned this at the beginning. So in relation to that, this is why I wanted to place the idea of reflexive modernity there, because if we're serious about putting the learner at the center, then we have to adopt models that are far more flexible, that are far more responsive, that allow the learners to make individual choices, to change direction. And of course, it means that we need systems in which the learner can engage throughout their lives. That, I was in a discussion yesterday about learning accounts, and learning accounts are all very well and so on and so forth, but there's a sense that they're finite. You can spend this and then you're done and dusted. You need to be able to continue your learning journey throughout your life. And that's a big challenge for us. We also need to be more cognizant of the learner's choices. We need to respect their autonomy to make decisions. And sometimes, very often, they know better what they want to do maybe than they're being told by within the system. So it needs to be a conversation. It needs to be a dialogue. We need to be very careful about top-down models that prescribe to people what they need to know and what they need to learn. And we have to be relevant in addressing the issues of our time. So, I mean, in relation to that, we have to be conscious that, it's the here and now that we're dealing with. It's also in terms of, the next steps. So we need to be anticipating. So we need to be really, really clear that we're not engaging people in education and learning that's irrelevant. I had a somewhat surreal experience when my children were in second level education. And I was at a parent-teacher meeting, and I'm meeting the teacher, and the teacher is telling me that they're doing Brazil. We're doing Brazil at the moment in the geography class. And she said, I'm teaching Brazil as a developing country. She said, I know it's a BRIC country, but the curriculum says it's a developing country, so that's what I have to teach. This is a complete failure of the education system. So you're acknowledging, teacher that can't do anything about it, you're acknowledging that you're engaging people with information and learning that's irrelevant, that's no longer current. We have to be current. We have to stay current in terms of what we're involved in. So I'm going to leave it there because I know Adeline has a lot of points that she wants to make.
Right. A very good morning to you, Seamus, Rhiannon, and our respected attendees who are in the European time zone, and a very good afternoon to our respected colleagues who are in the Asian time zone. First of all, I would like to thank you to Seamus and ASEM LLL Hub, Lifelong Learning Hub, for inviting me to my response to his presentation on the 5 capitals of learning, refocusing the lifelong learning agenda, including TVET. It is an honor to engage in this discussion, considering the recurrent discourse on the importance of TVET within the lifelong learning agenda. Right. So thank you, Seamus, again, for sharing the 5 capitals in learning with us. Before I begin my response, I would like to direct your attention to the picture on the left side of this slide. This is a picture of a trail in the jungle in Brunei. There are many ways to undertake this journey to reach the destination. For someone like me, I would normally ask experienced trekkers, what's the best and easiest way to arrive at the destination, because I'm pretty lazy sometimes. This is because I don't normally like surprises as well. But others, like some of my adventurous friends, may like to explore the route themselves without any guidance at all. Nevertheless, if we start at the same time, we should arrive at the destination at different time with different experiences, like what Seamus said. We do not start from the same position. My friend might be very experienced in trekking, and I'm not. Hence, the journey we take is a part of us. It is our own individual learning journey. If we are to understand an individual learning journey in becoming, for example, a professional such as a medical assistant at a hospital, this journey in itself may sound simple, but yet, like what Seamus said, it is quite complex. Seamus' presentation helps to illuminate the many factors that will influence this journey. To frame our discussion, I will begin my response with a brief overview of the 3 key points that this presentation actually show us. The first one is the concept of 5 capitals. It provides a holistic view of what learners need to thrive in this contemporary society. It acknowledges that lifelong learning goes beyond the acquisition of knowledge and skills and includes various aspects of life, such as social connections, cultural awareness, and identity and development. Additionally, it highlights the interconnected nature of these 5 capitals, which plays a role in the lifelong learning process. Second, the role of reflexivity. His presentation underscores the importance of reflexivity as a tool for individuals to envision their sense of self and future in an individual learning journey. Put it simply, lifelong learning is not just about acquiring skills, but also about personal growth and development. And reflexivity plays a significant role in this process. The presentation rightly emphasizes the use of a learner-centric approach, which points to the importance of prioritizing learner needs, their own motivations, in the domain of formal and non-formal lifelong learning. This learner-centric approach is essential for ensuring that educational experience, like the examples that Seamus shared with us, are meaningful and relevant to individuals. Diving deeper into a few of his concepts, just a few. Notable highlights. The presentation highlights the contemporary context of reflexive modernity that points to a period of significant society change where traditional norms and cultural understandings are being challenged by globalization and other forces which represent a transformation of modern society itself. He then discusses the role of reflexivity or critical self-awareness as a tool for us to understand our sense of self. We are in an era where individuals are increasingly, like what Seema said, required to constantly adapt to, reflect on the different aspects of our lives and conditions that will enable us to navigate the rapidly changing world to achieve our goals. And in relation to vocational and technical education, it brings us to the second point, actually, to what Seamus actually talked about. It relates to reflexivity, which suggests using a learner-centric approach that underscores the importance of prioritizing learner needs in the domain of formal and non-formal lifelong learning. This emphasizes the importance of individuals navigating their lives based on personal concerns and the need here for critical thinking and analytical skills in a rapidly changing world. So this subsequently points to topics for discussion on how can vocational and technical education play a role in fostering critical thinking and open-mindedness among learners. Now, moving on to capitals. The presentation brings out the multifaceted nature of the concept of capital and its relevance to various aspects of life, from economics to learning and personal development. Drawing on a range of views with relevant literature, he actually provides a rich tapestry of perspectives on the 5 capitals: social, cultural, identity, seed, and human capital, highlighting the historical evolution of the term capital. And of course, he gave a lot of anecdotes in how it is applied in different contexts, emphasizing its role as an asset that can be accrued, invested, and exchanged. These different forms of capital are interconnected and exist in a dynamic ecosystem of reflexivity. It should not be viewed in isolation, like what Seema said, as they exist in a symbiotic relationship. One notable insight is the concept of seed capital, that what Seema shared, in the context of adult education and its importance in facilitating participation in learning activities. It suggests that individuals who have already achieved a certain baseline of education are more likely to engage in adult education. This is supported by recent research findings, actually, presented in the OECD webinar during their launch of Global Outlook for 2023, that more educated adults have a significantly higher likelihood of participating in lifelong learning. Hence, this points to a stratification process that starts early in life and can be influenced by factors like family literacy levels. Given these educational disparities, targeted efforts and recognition of issues would be needed to address these disparities. Another way of thinking about capitals the capital of person, can be understood in relation to their complex positional relations and interactions in the field as a whole, which can only be illuminated through individual learning journeys and unlikely to be visible in a large-scale studies of groups. These capitals, for example, cultural capital, is not only relational to the field, but it also can vary over time, like what Seema said. You can accumulate it, you can exchange it, and you can invest in it. And what has value in one field may not do so in another. Sometimes having resources can sometimes be a help or hinder the process to become, the process of learning to become in a particular field. Having accumulated the cultural capital that is valued in the field can also influence the individual's perceptions of and responses to changed circumstances, like what Seema's actually shared with us. So within the context of vocational and technical education training, individual learners who are intending to enroll on a TVET program or workers, perhaps, who wish to re-enter the labor market would be required to draw on resources which can be defined as identity capital, to know about themselves, what they are capable to do, to help them to make appropriate strategic decisions about their life courses, for example, career choices. These resources include an internal locus of control, self-esteem, a sense of purpose in life, and a capacity for reflexivity, which is the ability to critically examine their own choices and actions. Again, Seema's presentation actually shared with us the concept of autonomy is valuable in lifelong learning. And perhaps one other concept to consider apart from autonomy is also agency. Both autonomy and agency are very important. For example, just to illustrate this, two individuals, Emily and Brendan, are both interested in becoming medical assistants through vocational and technical training, a vocation and role which requires specialized training and certification. Emily, who is a self-directed learner, conducts extensive research on the range of medical assistant programs, curricula and accreditation, and reads the reviews from previous students. She is able to identify online courses and self-study resources that align with her own schedule. She creates her own study chart, sets her own milestones, and monitors her own progress. She prefers to learn that way, at her own pace, and search for additional resources to support. Emily's story is an example of an individual learning to become a medical assistant through the pursuit of autonomy. Brendan, on the other hand, values structured support and guidance in his journey to become a medical assistant. He seeks advice from informal mentors, career counselors, and medical professionals who have had experience in the medical assisting occupation. After listening and gathering resources from them, he decides to embark in a formal medical assistant program in a vocational training institution. This program offers structured curriculum for him. He appreciates the opportunity to learn through interacting with his peers in this program and learn from and with his instructors. This is Brendan's story in the pursuit of agency. These two vignettes here that I've shared are examples of how individuals take ownership of their learning to become. Emily's stories demonstrate autonomy by taking full control of her learning process, choosing resources, and adapting her learning processes according to her preferences. She exercises a high degree of self-direction. She is self-directed with what and how to shape her vocational training. That is to lead her to become a medical assistant. Brendan, on the other hand, displays agency by seeking guidance and leveraging external guidance, such as mentors, counselors, medical practitioners, and formal education programs to facilitate his learning journey. He takes an active role in choosing the right resources of support and environments that best serve his goals. His story shows how individuals make informed decisions about his vocational training environment and leverages external resources to help him achieve his vocational goals. In summary, while both autonomy and agency are valuable in lifelong learning, They represent different approaches. Hence, these two vignettes demonstrate, which concurs again with what CMAS actually presented. And one of my research findings is that individual learning journey to become true vocational training is influenced by individual positions, that is, their capitals, and their opportunities and resources available for them. Hence, this returns back to the significant role of reflexivity, as pointed out by CMAS. We need to promote strategies which develop learners' reflexivity that involves self-awareness and willingness to challenge one's own assumptions through honest self-reflection. Just a short description of CMAS of presentation about his insight on the exploration of the bell. I think it certainly has become a resounding bell that rings for the world to hear and raise awareness amongst those working in educational research and education policy throughout Europe of the fact that lifelong learning benefits the society as a whole and individuals at all stages of their lives. It succinctly widens our view about lifelong learning and reminds us that lifelong learning extends beyond acquiring skills, where it is also a vehicle for personal growth and development. Overall, I think CMA's presentation provides a comprehensive overview of the concept of the different capitals and its usefulness as a framework to discuss the practical implications of TVET as part of the lifelong learning agenda. It encourages a learner-centric approach and underscores the importance of the 5 learning-related capitals in facilitating individuals' autonomy and success. Certainly, the presentation offers a thought-provoking exploration of reflexivity and the role of TVET in addressing contemporary challenges which could improve individual life chances. At this juncture, I would like to invite CMAS to discuss on some practical implications of these concepts in relation to vocational and technical education and adult education as part of the lifelong learning agenda. So I've prepared a few discussion questions, perhaps 1 or 2. Perhaps CMAS, you could share with us, like based on your experiences or any case studies that you know, could you share the strategies or best practices to foster reflexivity and critical thinking skills in adult or TVET education programs?
Yeah, thanks very much, Adeline. That was very comprehensive. I suppose one of the things that we've adopted is what we call the symbiotic learning paradigm. And the symbiotic learning paradigm is it's kind of we create a space in which learners and the various stakeholders and those on the education and training side engage in a process of program creation and program design. So that's one strategy that we use, which is quite useful because, for instance, especially with groups that are often left behind by the education and training system, their voice needs to be heard within it. So I think that's one of the ways that we do it for sure, to make sure that the learner voice is in there and that the learners are involved in, the design of the program and also in terms of ongoing evaluation of the program.
Yeah, I think I do agree with you. And I think one of the things that could be included in TVET education programs or any other adult education programs is to look into the importance of reflective practice, having individuals to reflect on their positions. And normally it would also be helpful if we actually conduct collective reflection, because individual reflection can help you to reflect about yourself, but it's equally important if you could actually someone else as well, so that like an informal mentor that could actually help in guiding you, whether you are, and also to widen your perspectives about where you can go, what you can do, what resources that you have, and to achieve your goals. So yeah, we have Professor Shiva. You might want to add something.
No, I think that's Lynn, that sounds good. I really enjoyed your response. It was very carefully considered, and you know, I think the good thing for me is that you brought out aspects of it maybe that I hadn't emphasized enough as well. And I think that's always the good point in terms of when you engage with somebody. So and I really like your idea of the forest there, and because it does actually very well capture the point I was trying to make in relation to social capital, or to seed capital. You know, the difference between your perspective. I'm not sure what's happening there. There's something else coming in. So yeah, yeah, and I think the point you make about agency is also very, very, very important. And again, I suppose agency is something that is, you know, not unconnected to identity capital. And this is one of the things I suppose that we manage to allow people to generate greater identity capital. In a sense, we're also giving them the capacity to generate greater agency, because it gives them a better sense of themselves, more confidence, and so on and so forth. So, you know, I think that was a really interesting dimension that you pulled out there as well.
Thank you, Adeline, and thank you, Seamus. I found that massively interesting, and if you'd like to follow up with any questions, you can contact me. I'll actually put my address in the chat there, or you can contact the ASEM Hub as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much to everyone for participating. Thank you, Rhiannon, for your experts moderating, and Adeline, thank you very, very, very much for your very carefully considered and detailed response. It was really, really good. I enjoyed that very much.
Thank you very much, Seamus. Thank you, everyone.